Hello, I'm Tori Street, and here is the Psychodynamic Approach, Chapter 12 in Leadership Theory and Practice, 7th edition by Peter G. Nordhaus. At its heart, leadership is about human behavior, what we do, how we do it, and why we do it. Our everyday behaviors and choices are influenced by a web of constantly shifting and irrational forces. The psychodynamic approach to leadership study and development focuses on the dynamics of human behavior, which are often the most difficult to understand. The clinical paradigm is a framework through which the psychodynamic lens is applied to the study of behavior in organizations. There are four basic premises to this paradigm. The first is that there is a rationale behind every human act. So all behavior has an explanation, and sometimes that explanation is elusive. The second is that a great deal of mental life, feelings, fears, and motives lie outside the conscious awareness. So human unconscious affects conscious reality. The third premise states that nothing is more central to whom a person is than the way he or she regulates and expresses emotion. So your emotions color your experiences with positive or negative connotations, and this creates a preference for choices and how individuals deal with certain situations and circumstances. And the fourth and final premise underlying the clinical paradigm is that human development is an inter- and intrapersonal process. So we are all products of our past experiences. And those experiences influence us throughout our lives. So even if those experiences happened in childhood, that will color future experiences and how we deal with that. The history of the psychodynamic approach. The psychodynamic paradigm has its origin in Freud's psychoanalytic theories of human behavior. While Freud himself didn't make any direct observations about the application to the working world, his paradigm was taken up by many of his contemporaries. Four streams of research emerged after World War II. First, the London Tavistock Institute was a group of psychoanalysts that elaborated on Bignon's work on the unconscious group functioning as a whole, rather than as an aggregate of individuals. This contributed greatly to our understanding of the hidden dynamics within an organization. The second stream is the Menninger Clinic. It was founded in 1942 to promote the training of psychoanalysts as they began to apply the psychodynamic approach to the world of work. Will Menninger started to implement week-long seminars for business leaders on why humans act the way they do in an effort to help these leaders understand their employees better. The third, the Harvard Business School, Harry Levinson applied psychoanalytic theory to management and leadership. He linked the failure of managers to effectively contain anxiety of workers to employees' depression and low productivity. And finally, Abraham Zelenak, marrying the world of work and the world of psychoanalysts, argued that business people focus too much on process and structure and not enough on emotions and ideas. He thought that leaders should relate to followers in more empathetic ways. This early work provided stimulus for the first international symposium on applied psychoanalysts and organizations. Some more notable names that we see, as I mentioned, Abraham Zelenak, Harry Hirschhorn, Alexander Mederschlich, Will Menninger, Harry Levison are just a few examples. Harry Hirschhorn was another really influential scholar in the study of organizational dynamics. He used the term applied clinical practice to describe organizational consulting interventions that included diagnostic methods and actions based on a clinical applied approach. So his study, The Workplace Within Psychodynamics of Organizational Life, kind of opened the door to a better understanding of the irrational and emotional character of organizations. And he proposed a systematic psychodynamic approach of work that entailed working with real clients on practical outcomes that also address the hidden unconscious mechanisms underlying the patterns of organizational behavior. So those underlying issues that play out in the real conscious. Alexander Mederschlich applied principles to post-war society in his works, Society Without the Father and the Inability to Mourn. So these works became extremely influential and not only shaped Germany's analysis of the cause of its war, but opened up the entire field of social psychology to a much broader audience. Key concepts and dynamics. So our first key concept that we're going to look at is focus on the inner theater. Early experiences with key individuals, such as family members or caregivers, contribute to the creation of our response patterns. So this inner theater is our stage, our personal stage that is filled with the people who have influenced our experiences in life. So like I said, family members, caregivers, those who have had an impact. These scripts are created in childhood, and they deal with core conflictual relationship themes, or CCRTs. These are our deepest desires, needs, goals, etc. that contribute to our unique personality style, become recurring relationship patterns we take into adulthood. So these things that we learn as children, they're rolling over and staying with us into adulthood. We act these themes out onto others and then react to their perceived reactions, not their actual reactions. The second concept is a focus on the leader-follower relationships. A study of leader-follower relationships addresses the psychology of the group. Psychiatrist Wilfred Bion identified 3 basic assumptions in groups. The first is dependency, and that's groups are united by feelings of helplessness, inadequacy, neediness, and fear of the outside world. This contributes to goal-directedness, but also impairs the follower's critical judgment and leaves them unwilling to take initiative. The second is the fight or flight. It's a category of friend or foe where fight reactions manifest in aggression against self, peers, or authority figures, and a sense of unity is reassuring but makes a group increasingly dependent on their leader, which, could not be good. And then lastly is pairing assumption. Pairing helps cope with anxiety, alienation, and loneliness. But pairing also implies splitting. So that also is something that they have to think about with the pairing assumption. It can manifest itself in ganging up against the leader perceived as an aggressor or an authority figure if that pairing is occurring. Some other things are social defense mechanisms, which is when organizational anxieties are not properly managed, and people may act out and engage in regressive social defenses to transform and neutralize a situation where the tensions are very strong. Mirroring and idealizing are 2 types of transferential processes that are especially common in the workplace. With mirroring, just taking cues from those around us about being and our behaviors. And this leads to a mutual admiration between a leader and a follower if this mirroring is occurring, and idealizing. But if this idealization persists to where the leader and follower stop responding to the reality of situations, then we're encountering problems where they're not focusing on the organizational issues that need to be handled, and instead allowing their past hopes and fantasies to govern their interactions in the present. Next, we have identification with the aggressor. So that's behavior used as a defense mechanism to overcome anxiety, and it's prompted by a leader who has aggressive behavior. So when a leader has this kind of aggressive, everything is a black-white world, and people are either against me or for me, when a leader thinks in that way and has that mindset, then independent thinkers are removed, and those who aren't the first to collaborate become fresh targets for the leader's anger or scapegoats that the group can blame when anything goes wrong. A folie à deux is a shared madness when a dominant person whose delusions become adopted by other members of the organization occurs. So in extreme cases, this can lead to self-destruction of the leader in a professional sense, which then in turn creates a collective demise for all the followers of this leader. Our last key concept is narcissism. And at the heart of leadership lies narcissism. Freud summarized behaviors that range from normal self-interest to a pathological self-absorption as this sort of narcissism. This offers leaders the conviction about the righteousness of their cause, which in turn inspires loyalty and group identification from their followers. So this narcissism can be either constructive or reactive. Constructive, or what we could also say as healthy, narcissists have been fortunate enough to have caretakers who gave them a supportive environment that led to basic trust and a sense of control over their actions. In leadership roles, these constructive narcissists are relatively well balanced and have a sense of self-esteem and vitality and a capacity for introspection and empathy with their peers. They inspire others to not only be better at what they're doing, but to also entirely change what they do. Reactive or excessive narcissistic leaders would be the more negative aspect of this on this spectrum. They, on the other hand, were not as fortunate in childhood to have that supportive environment. Instead, they were recipients of over or under stimulation, inconsistent stimulation. Such leaders are fixated on issues of power, status, prestige, and superiority. They're driven towards achievement and attainment, but need to get even for those slights they experienced in childhood for not having that supportive environment. They're not willing to tolerate any disagreement or criticism, and so because of that, they won't consult with others. This results in the reactive narcissists, operating in their own reality without any measure of control or reality testing, eventually wreaking havoc in the organization. So let's ask ourselves, how does this all work? The essence of leadership is about human behavior, and effective leadership is rooted in the underlying motives that govern such behavior. Anyone wanting to create or manage an effective organization needs to understand the complexity of why leaders act the way they do. This is what the psychodynamic approach covers. So because of this, there are several strengths as well as criticisms with this approach to leadership. The psychodynamic approach addresses underlying issues in organizational life. It involves an in-depth and systemic investigation of a single person, group, event, or community. So it's not only an analysis of the self, but it's also the self in relation to others, in the end resulting in providing rich and detailed behavior or insight to a person's behavior. And also it focuses on the dynamics of the relationship between a leader and a follower. And how do leaders kind of internalize this ability to work and learn and reflect the psychological realm in the mind in a way that improves their organizational relationships and team performance, improving the overall organization. The criticisms of this approach include that the early work was based on clinical observations of individuals with mental issues. So, that's not necessarily the best place that you want to come from in trying to relate this to what many people would consider as normal thinking brains, and I say that with the idea in mind that what is normal, we aren't even sure. But the early studies on this were done on individuals with serious mental issues. So the early approach focused on dysfunction and is premised on atypical or abnormal behaviors rather than typical behaviors. Also, there's no conventional training for this type of leadership. It's because the focus is to increase an individual's self-awareness so that they can find better ways to behave and relate personally. So because that varies so much from individual to individual, there's no standard solution of training that can be applied broadly in that sense. And lastly, the focus is on the individual, which truly can take away from the focus on structural and systemic organizational issues. Again, not necessarily a bad thing on one side because you're focusing on the individual and how they can be better, but with that being said, the focus is having to come away from the organizational issues in a way in order to focus on the individual. So how can we apply this approach to leadership into a leadership development program or in a way that benefits and allows leaders to use this approach? One of the main ways we can do this is through group coaching. This is guided by an external group facilitator. It identifies individual and team issues to obtain the major themes. Surveys are given. Behavior identification is done. All of that goes on. So because there are a number of complex, both conscious and unconscious psychological processes at play in this theory, there are several ways that we can do things. To start, a group intervention would provide context for cathartic experiences, so kind of an emotional cleansing, allowing executives to get things off their chest, putting things out in the open. While listening to other leaders' life stories and challenges, the other members of the group can realize that they have, gone through this before as well. They're not alone in this, which applies a mutual identification of these specific problems and eventually brings the team together. A psychodynamic lens into this discussion can set into motion a whole process of associations as to why their leader has been doing things a particular way, and it contributes to reflections on is that way that the leader has been doing it, is that the best way? Are there better ways? How can we solve problems and create a better environment for everyone working there? In addition, such reflections can lead to a willingness to experiment in doing things differently. So have those reflections and that psychodynamic lens shed light on a willingness to take a chance and do something in a different way. This group counseling also offers opportunity for vicarious learning. So everyone, leaders especially, come to realize that learning does not only occur through direct participation in the dialogue, but also just sitting and listening to others have that dialogue and relating to that dialogue. During the group coaching process, the leaders going to facilitate a real community. They're going to become a member of a group that has gone through the same emotional experiences, and in that way, they're going to rely on each other and have a feeling of belonging, which can be a really powerful catalyst for change. A group setting is also a great opportunity for collective learning. This allows explanation, clarification, and even direct advice on how to do things better within a group that can reduce anxiety and establish control where there are issues that are troublesome. And finally, this group coaching model is a further positive force for change. Within it is altruistic motive. So the desire to put the needs of others before your own. Helping for helping's sake may seem selfless, but it can have some selfish side effects. The act of giving to others rather than helping for helping's sake allows us not only to benefit those that we're helping, but also have some personal benefit. Offering support, reassurance, suggestions, and insights can be therapeutic not only to the recipient, but to the offer of those things as well. Effective leaders have two roles, a charismatic one and an architectural one. In the charismatic role, leaders envision a better future and empower and energize their followers to work towards that vision. In the architectural role, leaders address issues related to organizational design processes and control and reward systems. Both of these roles are necessary to have an effective leadership, but it's rare to find someone that can fulfill both roles seamlessly. The first step in finding a good leader is to identify each individual's personality makeup and leadership style. Something that is really interesting in finding this as it relates to the psychodynamic approach is the Leadership Archetype Questionnaire, which you can find on page 318 of your text. Take a look at this and see for yourself kind of what scoring interpretation you think that you would be. So what type of leader would you be? There are 8 different types. The strategist, so that is a person who is good at dealing with developments in an organization's environment. They're providing vision, strategic direction, outside-the-box thinking. The change catalyst is the second. They function best with the integration of organizational cultures after merger or acquisition, when re-engineering and turnaround projects are really big, and a lot of change is happening because they are excellent at managing rapidly growing organizational units and recognizing opportunities for transformation. The transactor is someone who likes making deals. They're very dynamic and enthusiastic. They thrive on new challenges and negotiations, have a high risk tolerance, like adventure and exploration. They're very proactive in welcoming the change, and they're very instinctive at networking with people. There's the builder, who enjoys starting their own organizations and setting up other types of ventures within that organization. They have a real need for independence and to be in control. But they also have the talent to make everything they want to do happen. They have a lot of energy, drive, enterprise, and creative and decisive type of leaders. They're very quick to adapt when they see opportunities. The innovator is a very curious leader. They always want to learn more about anything and everything. They have a very real passion for learning new things, and they are searching for knowledge every chance that they get. The processor is someone who creates order out of disorder, and they want to make everything organized and have effective transitions, more professionally managed. They're very good at setting boundaries and creating the structures and systems that are necessary to support an organization's objectives. There's the coach, who is very good at instituting culture change projects to address organizational alienation, loss of trust. And they're very good listeners. They are able to empathize with their employees, have a high emotional intelligence, and a positive and constructive outlook on life. And they really inspire confidence and trust in their leadership. Good communicators and great motivators. The communicator is the last option we have there for types of leaders. And they have an ability to express a vision in a strong and powerful way, and they can inspire people at all levels in the organization. And they project optimism in times of adversity or crisis, and they're just very, very good at having a presence and building alliance and enlisting the support of other people in an organization. So those are the options for those leadership archetypes. I would suggest that you all go in there and find out for yourselves what archetype you most identify with. I think it was a pretty eye-opening type thing, and it might not be what you think it is. In conclusion, the psychodynamic approach is an approach to leadership that goes beyond the traditional approach. Only in understanding ourselves and our drivers, and in turn turning our analytic gaze to deciphering the motivations and behaviors of those around us, can we truly understand the complexity of the system in which we live and work. The psychodynamic approach not only provides us with better self-knowledge, but also this knowledge can be used in our interface with other organizational actors in our environment, and the way that allows us to shape and influence and leverage the dynamics of our organizations.